I want to start today by asking you to picture a scenario with me. And I should warn you, right out of the gate, this isn't a fun one. It's actually a little terrifying if you really sit with it.
Okay, I'm ready.
Imagine for a second that all limits were just gone. And I don't mean like in a movie, The Purge or something where it's one night of chaos. I mean permanently.
Like a removal of the structure.
Exactly. No laws,
Yeah.
no fear of punishment, no police, but also, and this is the key part, no one is watching you. No social media, no neighbors peeking through the blinds, zero consequences. You are invisible. You are untouchable.
Just you. And the absolute power to do whatever you want.
The question is, in that specific vacuum-sealed scenario, would you still be a moral person?
That's the ultimate hypothetical. It's the sort of question that just ruins a dinner party.
It is. And I think most of us, our first instinct is to nod and think, of course I would. I'm a good person. I have principles. I don't need a cop standing over me to not hurt people. But today's deep dive is going to push back on that assumption aggressively.
No.
We are looking at a deep analysis of the existential philosophy of Fyodor Dostoevsky, specifically digging into the characters in Crime and Punishment and the brothers Karamazov.
And Dostoevsky is the perfect guide for this. He was obsessed with the human condition under pressure. He doesn't care about how we act when everything's fine. He wants to know what happens in the dark, what happens when the whole structure fails.
Right, and the source material we have today, it makes this really bold claim. It argues that what we call freedom doesn't necessarily make us better. In fact, it says that when you remove consequences, morality doesn't collapse because people turn into, violent animals. It collapses because people become too logical.
That is a fascinating distinction, and it's one that trips people up. We think of a breakdown of society as, chaotic, violence smashing windows, fires in the street. But the source argues the breakdown of the individual is actually really rational. It's cold, it's calculated.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics of this. The source says this question isn't for criminals, it's for normal people. Why that distinction?
Well, because a criminal has already crossed that line. They've already decided the social contract doesn't apply. This analysis is for the decent person. The person who believes their morality is internal. And the source argues that for most of us, what we think is our conscience is really just a reaction to external barriers.
Barriers, you mean like laws or?
Laws, fear of losing your job, fear of your neighbor judging you. They're like fences, they keep us in line.
So we're only good because we're fenced in. That feels a bit cynical, doesn't it?
It is cynical, but is it wrong? That's the uncomfortable part. The source asks, what happens when the fence comes down? Or when you just can't see it anymore? Dostoevsky's fear wasn't that we'd all start screaming and breaking things. His fear was, how sophisticated will our excuses become?
Wow, how sophisticated will our excuses become? That is chilling. It implies we don't just lose control. We rewrite reality to justify what we want to do?
Precisely. The source points out that morality collapses via reason. When the limits fade, we don't say, I want to be evil now. That's cartoon villain stuff.
Right, that's comic book logic.
Real humans use adult reasoning.
Yeah.
We say things like, well, the goal is good, or I'm only doing this because the circumstances forced me to.
Oh, I see. Or the classic, if I don't do it, someone else will.
Right. I'm just being a realist. That doesn't sound evil, does it?
No, it sounds like management. It sounds practical.
And that is the danger. The source calls this the rationalization of evil. When there's no external check, no judge, no immediate consequence, we are terrifyingly good at reframing a bad action as a necessary one.
Yeah.
We don't abandon our principles, we just argue they don't apply in this specific case.
It's the exception clause. We give ourselves an exception.
Exactly. And once you give yourself one, you can give yourself 1,000.
This brings us to that famous and often misunderstood line from the brothers Karamazov. We have to talk about Ivan Karamazov.
If God does not exist, everything is permitted.
Yeah. Now, I've heard that used in religious debates to say, see, atheists have no morals, but the source says that's not what Ivan meant at all.
No, not at all. Ivan isn't celebrating. He's suffering. He's issuing a challenge, like a stress test for the human soul. He's asking, can morality stand on its own 2 feet without some external authority? Whether that authority is God or the state or just your neighbors watching you. If you take away the big brother figure, is there anything left?
So it's moving from black and white into this gray zone. And in that gray zone, we stop asking, is this wrong?
No. The question changes. It becomes, is this efficient? Or can I justify this? The source calls this the shift from a hard limit to a negotiation. And once morality becomes a negotiation, the ego almost always wins. Because the ego is a fantastic debater. It will always find a way to prove that what you want to do is what you should do.
It's like having a lawyer in your head who works on retainer for your worst impulses.
That's a perfect analogy. And that lawyer is very, very good at their job.
This is where it gets really interesting for anyone who's read Crime and Punishment. We have to talk about Raskolnikov, because he is the poster child for this whole idea. And to be clear, Raskolnikov isn't some brute or a psychopath.
Far from it. He's brilliant. He's a student. He's hyper-intellectual. And it's so important to remember, he didn't kill those two women because he was in a blind rage or because he was a sadist.
Right, he had a whole theory. He literally wrote a paper on it.
Exactly. He killed out of a theory. He believed that there are extraordinary people who are allowed to cross moral boundaries for the greater good. The Napoleons, he called them. He convinced himself that killing a pawnbroker, who he saw as a louse, a parasite, would let him take her money and do great things with it.
So in his own head, he wasn't a villain. He was a hero doing the hard thing. He was optimizing society.
Yes, and that is the burden of freedom the source talks about. When you have absolute freedom, your ego creates a narrative where you're the protagonist. You're not doing bad things. You're doing necessary things. You're bearing a burden that weaker people can't.
It's the ultimate ego trip. I am above the rules because I'm special.
And modern evil often looks just like that. It doesn't need to be hateful. It just needs to be calculated. The source emphasizes that when limits fade, the ego rises above morality. We stop asking, is this right? And start asking, can I live with who I will become?
And the scary answer is usually yes.
Usually yes. Because the ego is so adaptable, we get used to the new version of ourselves very quickly.
That leads me to the next big point in the source material, the erosion of conscience. Because I think a lot of us rely on that idea of, I couldn't live with myself. We think guilt is a failsafe.
We think of conscience as a brick wall. Like, I will hit this wall and I'll stop.
But the source argues Dostoevsky saw conscience as something much more slippery. It's not a wall, it's more like a fluid. It just adapts to whatever container you put it in.
So we just lower the bar.
We lower the bar, but we don't feel like we're lowering it. We feel like we're becoming pragmatic. The source describes this process where the mind deals with a lack of limits by simply adjusting its self-image. You don't feel like a bad person. You feel flexible.
Flexible, that sounds so corporate. It fits, doesn't it? The scary part isn't the action. It's that we learn to sleep soundly afterwards because we've rationalized it away. We've successfully explained to ourselves why it was the only option. We edit the memory until it looks clean.
It's like we gaslight ourselves.
Effectively, yes. And this is why virality collapses not through some sudden explosion, but through a slow, quiet adaptation. We get used to the dark. Our eyes adjust.
Let's bring this into the real world. Because we aren't all Raskolnikov, I hope. The source gives some modern examples that I think are going to make a lot of listeners a little uncomfortable. It talks about invisible power.
Yes, because today our power is so abstract. The source brings up the bureaucrat or the system manager.
The person making decisions with clicks.
Right. Think about modern work. Someone managing an algorithm or a budget. They make a choice to optimize a process. And maybe that decision denies healthcare to 1,000 people or fires 500 workers.
But they don't see the people, they just see a spreadsheet.
No one screams in their office, there's no blood on the floor. Morality is replaced by metrics. The source argues this isn't evil in the old-fashioned demonic sense. It's banal. But it's so dangerous because the consequence is invisible to the person doing it.
They can just go home and have dinner with their kids and feel like a good person because they hit their targets, they did their job.
Exactly. The moral break relies on seeing the pain you cause. Empathy is triggered by sight, by sound. When you put a screen between you and the result, that break fails. You are free to destroy, as long as you call it optimization.
It reminds me of, drone warfare, or even just firing someone over Zoom. The distance creates this moral vacuum.
Distance is the enemy of conscience.
And the second example is one we're all too familiar with: online anonymity.
This is the perfect laboratory for Dostoevsky's question. When you're anonymous, you're basically stripped of consequence. You're invisible.
And we see what happens. People say things they would never, ever say to someone's face.
Because the check is usually, will I get punched? Or will this person look hurt? Online, the check is just, is there a reaction? If there's no immediate consequence, the moral break fails. We tell ourselves, it's just the internet, or it's not real.
It's not real. There's that rationalization again.
It is. It's a way to disconnect the action from its morality. You convince yourself that the pixels on the screen aren't a person. You dehumanize them so you can feel good about attacking them.
It really does circle back to Raskolnikov. He dehumanized the pawnbroker into a louse. We dehumanize people into avatars or trolls.
And once you dehumanize, anything is permitted.
So if laws don't work and fear doesn't work and our conscience is too slippery, what's left? The source does pivot to a kind of solution, a structure for survival.
It does. And it's not an easy one. Dostoevsky suggests that if you want to be moral in a state of absolute, pillar one is absolute responsibility. This is the refusal to blame the system, the circumstances, or the times we live in.
So no saying, I was just following orders or everyone else does it.
Right. It's looking at your action and saying, I chose this. Even if the system pressured you, you made the final click.
Yeah.
It's admitting you are the author of your actions. It's incredibly heavy, which is why most people avoid it. We'd love to be victims of circumstance.
It's much easier to say I had no choice. It absolves you.
But the moral person says, I always have a choice, even if that choice is to suffer.
Okay, that leads to pillar 2, which I found the most surprising.
Pillar 2 is living with contradiction.
What does that mean here?
It means being willing to sit with the pain of a bad choice, rather than rationalizing it away to feel better. Usually when we do something wrong, we immediately try to fix the cognitive dissonance. We spin a story to make ourselves the good guy.
So we can sleep at night.
Dostoevsky says, don't sleep. If you did something wrong, let it hurt. Don't fix the narrative. The pain is the only thing that proves your conscience is still alive. If you rationalize it away, you've killed it.
Wow. So embrace the guilt. That runs contrary to almost all modern self-help, which is about forgiving yourself and moving on.
It does. But Dostoevsky would argue that cheap forgiveness is just ignoring the rot. Embrace the truth of the contradiction. You are a person who wants to be good, who did something bad. Sit in that fire, don't put it out with excuses. That suffering is what cleanses you.
That's intense, but I see the logic. If it doesn't hurt, you'll do it again. If you can explain it away, you'll repeat it.
Exactly. The pain is the only real teacher.
Okay, pillar 3.
Self-imposed limits. This is the hardest one. It's drawing a line in the sand that you simply will not cross. Not because the law says so, not because someone is watching, but because crossing it would destroy your own sense of who you are.
It's an existential line, not a legal one.
Exactly. It's saying, I could do this, no one would know, I would profit from it, but I will not do it because if I do, I am no longer me. You define yourself by what you refuse to do, even when you have the power to do it.
That sounds heroic, but the source ends on a pretty pessimistic note about this, doesn't it?
It does. It notes that Dostoevsky's conclusion was that most people, well, they just aren't strong enough for this. It's not an insult, it's an observation. This level of internal structure is crushing. It's exhausting to be that self-aware all the time. Most people need external rules. We need the guardrails. Without them, we don't become villains, we just become efficient. We drift. And drifting into evil is much more common than diving into it.
So true morality is rare.
True morality, the kind that exists in the dark without an audience, is an existential achievement. It is not the default setting. The default is self-preservation and rationalization.
So what does this all mean for us? I think the big takeaway here is that we need to stop congratulating ourselves for being good when we're just being obedient.
That's the critical distinction. Obedience to consequences isn't morality. Morality only begins when you have the power to do whatever you want, and you choose not to. It's a choice, not a social rule.
It's easy to be good when the cop car is right behind you.
Exactly. The test is when the road is empty.
And I think that applies to the small things too. It's not just murder. It's how you treat people when you have leverage. It's about being honest when a lie would be so much easier and no one would know.
It is. It's every moment you prioritize what is right over what works for me, especially when what works for me has no cost. That's the stress test Ivan Karamazov was talking about.
This has been a heavy one, but man, it really makes you look at your own choices differently. It makes you realize how much of our goodness is just habit or fear.
And that realization is the first step. You can't build that internal structure if you don't know you need it. You have to recognize that little Napoleon inside you, that desire to make an exception for yourself before you can stop it.
I want to leave you today with the final provocation from our source material. It's something to chew on.
It's a question that cuts through all the noise.
If tomorrow no one was watching, if there were absolutely no consequences for your actions, no laws, no judgment, no karma, What specific thing inside of you, not outside, would stop you from doing the worst thing you can imagine? And the terrifying follow-up, does that thing inside you even exist?
Or is it just a reflection of the fence that's currently there?
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Let us know what you find when you look for that line in the sand.
Take care.